At 8,200 feet, the whole camper used to shake, and cold air just stole our warmth completely away. Since we added siding, the camper stays warmer, it doesn't shake, and it finally looks like less of a junkyard and more like a little homestead. A siding project like this doesn't really need any experience. The framing can be fudged, siding material is flexible, and you don't have to do fancy trim or painting if you don't want to. We honestly just kind of had fun with the project. I broke it down into a few simple systems as always. First, a frame to hold everything. Second, insulation over that frame to trap warmth. Third, siding to protect from weather. And finally, a little trim and paint just to make it feel a little bit more like home. Once I had these pieces, it kind of all just came together. Some people just use siding like foam board underneath their camper, but I wanted something a little bit more robust and a little bit more modular, so I started with a 2x4 frame that was going to give my whole structure stability. The 2x4 studs are rigid enough to handle high winds, and they leave room for more insulation beyond just a foam board. No need to be a framer, a few rectangles and some placement is enough here. What I did was measure the distance of my frame, so let's say 8 feet across the top, and then the height at each side at the beginning and the end of that 8 feet. Now, if you know anything about trapezoids and triangles and squares, you would know that the bottom element needs to be a little bit longer, and there's some super cool math you could do for that, but I just kind of eyeballed it. Okay, so we also want to be able to take these apart because it is a camper. So we're building each panel modular, which means that in between the two different sections of frame, we're not going to be screwing through the sides like you normally would. We're going to use these bridge plates right here, and these are going to go on the front. Now for now, because of cost constraints, I'm just using normal screws, but once we get trim on and everything's finished, I want to actually sink bolts in there. This way, I just have 3 screws to undo, and I can take every single element of this siding apart one by one and stack them if I want to go camping. So as we completed the frame, we finally had something to start attaching our actual siding and insulation to. The first layer of our siding will be the insulation. This helps us keep warm air from bleeding out and reduce heater workload inside the camper. The more hot air we lose because we've got whipping ice cold winds underneath us, the more the heater has to run, and, subsequently, the more money I have to spend on propane. So I really wanted to get this right. We can come in later and add more expensive insulation, but for now, 1-inch rigid foam board works. It's cheap, easy, and since we attach it over the frame and not between the frame, it helps prevent thermal bridging. Now, if you're unaware of what thermal bridging is, thermal bridging occurs when structural materials like our 2x4 frame or the 2x4 walls in your house attach directly to the siding. Instead of holding heat, these structural elements actually wick the heat from the inside to the outside and dissipate it to the exterior as the material tries to equalize its temperature. By covering our frame with insulation instead of insulating between the frame, we help prevent this from happening. So yesterday, I had just gotten tired of working, and I decided instead of putting on all the metal siding right away, let's just get the foam board up and get insulated. It wasn't supposed to snow for another week, so I just barely got us kind of half-sided in yesterday, which I am happy we decided to do that. On my nose. The siding's job is to lock everything in. It's going to protect the insulation from moisture, wind, and any kind of debris the wind is going to kick up. And it turns what looks like a temporary fix into something that's actually finished and durable. We lucked out and got spare steel roofing from a neighbor. It's tough, it's waterproof, and already designed to live outside, so it made a perfect outer skin for this setup, without adding too much extra cost either. Because we are attaching it over insulation, I used 2-inch roofing screws. These self-tap, so I didn't even have to pre-drill anything, just straight through the panel, straight through the foam, straight into the stud. Functionally, it worked, but visually, it still needed a little bit more TLC. So we decided to do some structural cleanup, and we'll do that in the next phase. Final phase was all about closing the gaps. Like, literally, we needed to get those gaps out of there, and mentally, we needed the project to feel finished. Filling in the odd spaces and adding trim makes the camper feel cozy and protected. Like we're actually settling in for the long haul instead of just barely surviving in the cold.
No hole.
For the weird shapes, like by the slides, I used foam board back with painted OSB, cutting everything to fit as tight as possible. Where perfect fits weren't realistic, I just kind of used some duct tape to handle the seams. 2x6 trim went over the panels to clean up the edges, and a final coat of paint tied it all together. Now, obviously, you'll notice that there's not the final coat of paint like stain on top of the boards here, but it got too cold and the stain wouldn't set in, so we gotta wait till next spring. By this point, the system was already working, but this TLC made it feel finished. The function was there before, now it actually looks like it belongs, which set the stage for the next upgrades without this one feeling like just another temporary solution. So how does it work? Since we added the siding along with our underbelly insulation, heating the camper has been easy. Propane, yes, still costs too much money, but we can hit any temperature quickly. So the only thing limiting us now is how much money I want to spend on propane. Even when we left for vacation with our thermostat set to 37 degrees, nothing froze inside the camper. By blocking wind, air stays still, warms up, and pulls less heat from the camper. The modular frame lets us take it apart if we want to travel. It's simple, it's effective, and it allows us to be flexible. This was one stage of a two-part system though. We also insulated the camper's bottom, which you can check out here. I'd love to hear how you handle cold camper floors. Drop your tips and ideas in the comments, and as always, we don't know what we're doing, but we're just gonna do it anyway.